Quaid Azam, Part 397. In the autumn of 1916, when it was known that the British authorities were also considering this question, 19 members of the Indian Legislative Council, Hindus, Muslims, drew up an agreed plan of constitutional advance, and at the end of the year, the pact was formally ratified at Lucknow. Appendix 2. The official British opinion on the Montague-Chelmsford reforms. British opinion, like the Indian, had been affected by the war. For the first few years after the introduction of Morley Minto reforms, it was taken for granted that some considerable time would elapse before another advance could be justified. The British were yet not prepared to accept the colonial model as the guiding line of the development in India. In a dispatch 1911 mainly concerned with the establishment of a new capital at Delhi and with the reversal of the Lord Curzon's partition of Bengal, the central government had declared itself in favor of gradually giving the provinces a large measure of self-government. This statement of policy had been welcomed not only by the Congress, but also by Mr. Montague under Secretary of State for India, prompting Lord Curzon to ask if the British government were considering a further constitutional advance. But provincial self-government did not necessarily mean self-government by Indians, nor had this dispatch raised any doubts as to the necessity of safeguarding the ultimate supremacy of the government of India, on which maintenance of British rule in India depends. Thus interpreted, Lord Crewe, the Secretary of State, in his reply could argue that there was nothing new in the policy of devolution from the centre. The Congress, in other words, had wrongly interpreted the dispatch, but Lord Crewe went further. He alluded to the hopes expressed by the Indian politicians without the least taint of the disloyalty or any desire to break the British connection of attaining in India something approaching in the self-government enjoyed by those colonies which have of late years received the name of Dominion. I say quite frankly, he declared, that I see no future for India on those lines, and he denied that the policy of devolution implied that anything of the kind is hope or goal of His Majesty's ministers or of the present government of India. Next I read Appendix 3, that is the Lucknow Pact. This agreement between the major political organizations, a striking expression of Indian nationalism, was only achieved through major concessions granted to both sides. The Congress at last conceded separate Muslim electorates. It even acquiesced in their introduction in the Punjab and central provinces, where they had not yet existed. Seats on the councils were allotted to those electorates on a generous scale. In Bengal, the Muslims were to obtain only 3/4 of the seat to which they would have been entitled on a purely numerical basis, and in the Punjab only 9/10, but in both these provinces this was great increase on the extent of Muslim representation under Morley Minto reforms. In Bengal it was raised from 10.4 to 40%, in the Punjab from 25% to 50%, and in the other provinces Muslims were to obtain many more seats than they had then or would have on population basis. In the United Provinces and Madras, for example, a 14 and 6.15% Muslims population would have a 30 and 15% representation. Muslim strength at the center was similarly increased by all the allotment of 1/3 of the elections to the council to separate Muslim constituencies. The Muslims were to surrender the additional advantage that they obtained in 1909 of also voting in general electorates. but by the more conservative or communal minded among them, this may well have been regarded as no less, since it emphasized and secured the distinction between the two communities.